we're basically there. This is Avengers No Surrender Part 15, and this is basically the finale. Jim Zub was on Twitter, and he was talking about this, about how issue 15 is basically the end issue, and then the last part, Part 16, will be sort of the epilogue wrap-up issue. So, almost 4 months later, we finally get to the end of this event. And this issue was kind of a clarifying issue for me, because the whole time up to this point, there were parts of this series that I liked. There would be occasional character moments, there would be occasional plot points, occasional things that I actually did like, and I was never able to give the series full credit for those things that I did like, and I was never 100% sure why. Is it just because I don't like Mark Waid and Al Ewing? Is it just because I don't like modern Marvel or the modern Avengers? Is it just because of this whole idea of a 16-part weekly series selling it for, in this case, $5 an issue? Was it just dumb enough that I couldn't get past it? And, you know, all of these things may in some part be true. But I think the really big reason, from just a story perspective, was finally sort of revealed to me in this issue. Because something happens here that I thought was genuinely cool, and then I realized that it exposed a flaw in the entire structure of the story. So, in the last issue, Quicksilver sacrificed himself to bring back all of the Avengers that were being kept in stasis. And so all of the Avengers, which for some reason includes the Champions, don't know why they're here, and also America Chavez, for some reason, who isn't even in the Avengers, but whatever. They're all going around, and they're like saving people from all these disasters that are happening as a result of Earth spinning out of control, because this machine here, this, you know, whirly doohickey machine, is keeping the planet in stasis, or in a relatively stable orbit, and it just went haywire because of this dude here, the Challenger, who is just tired of Grandmaster, he's tired of Earth, he's tired of the Avengers, and he just wants to destroy all of it. And he's very close to succeeding in doing so. So this whirly bird doohickey thing right here, I don't know what to call it, that is being held up by Sunspot, Roberto Del Costa, and Hercules. Somebody was saying in the last video, Great Canadian Neckbeard on Twitter actually, he was telling me that Sunspot really is about as strong as Hercules when he lets his powers go full, you know, get to their max level. And my problem isn't so much that Sunspot's powers, because I don't know who Sunspot is. I don't really know much about X-Men, like especially like the sort of New Mutants era, Cable, X-Force, all that. I really don't know much about that stuff, and I think that comes through every single time that I talk about it. But it wasn't so much that I had a problem with him being the strong. It's more like Hercules should be able to do this all by himself, and I don't really know why Sunspot is there helping him. And then female Thor is there too, and she decides to help as well. Hercules is holding this thing in place, and he says, he's talking about Sunspot, and he says, when mortals rise to do the work of the gods. And then Jane Foster says, indeed, and what god would I be if I did not help? Bitch, you are not a god. You are a mortal with the power of a god whose name was given to you because he totally cucked out and just allowed you to go by his name. I'm so glad she's dead. I'm so glad that shortly after this event, in canon, in continuity, she's gonna die of cancer. Just go away already. Oh my gosh. And then anyway, so Grandmaster's game room, where he was coordinating this whole thing, is apparently on Earth, which was never something that was totally apparent to me. But whatever. It turns out Grandmaster, who looked like he got exploded a few issues ago, is still intact, although he's not very happy because he realizes that he lost to this dude. And so the entire Avengers are fighting this guy, and they're not doing very well. I mean, this Challenger's obviously a big dude. I mean, he looks like he's about, 9 feet tall and 600 pounds of muscle. I mean, so he's obviously a big dude, but him taking on the entire Avengers like this, we were never really told he could do that. In the last issue, he punched Hulk into orbit, which just seemed weird. It just kind of seems like that they just needed a generic evil bad dude who was really strong, and they came up with this guy. And then we get Voyager, who was the new character introduced to this series, and she turns out is Grandmaster's daughter, but she's basically defected to try to help the Avengers beat Challenger. So they're all going against him, and Lightning, who was the character from whom this story, we initially saw his perspective. In the very first part of this series, it was all told from his point of view. And every issue since then has been told from a different Avengers point of view. But this effectively finale of the series is also told from Lightning's point of view, which I don't know how to feel about that. So Lightning finally catches up to where the audience is, which is that he realizes that all these characters that he thought had died, Human Torch and Red Wolf, are not dead. They're just in these crystalline structures here. And he's trying to get Grandmaster to release them. So he challenges him to a game of Texas Hold'em, because Grandmaster, all he cares about is games. And so Lightning realizes that that's the only way to get him to pay attention. So we're seeing the Avengers collectively take on Challenger and losing. Meanwhile, the Earth is, getting worse and worse. It's going out of its orbit. It's starting to fracture apart. And then finally, Lightning is playing Grandmaster in this poker game, and we can see in these pages here that he has a full house in Texas Hold'em. We don't see what Lightning has. Grandmaster's hand, it's statistically almost impossible to beat, but there are a couple of hands that cards on the board could beat. So Lightning has been ramping up the bets as the game's been going on, and then finally he gets to this part right here, which is that Grandmaster, who knows he has an almost unbeatable hand, he's raised once again, and what Lightning raises is that his history, that basically if Lightning loses this game, he will be forgotten. Everything that he's ever done, all the people that knew him, everything that he's helped to do in his career as a C-list level Avenger will just be completely erased from history. The deeds themselves won't be undone, but the memory of it will. And Grandmaster realizes that if he calls this bet, then he has to stake the same, which is that all the games that he's won, nobody will remember them. This scene right here, where Lightning is challenging Grandmaster, who's an elder of the universe, one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy, somebody who's come up against the Avengers time and time again, who's caused trouble on a universal scale, and Lightning challenges him to a poker game. This scene was actually really cool. And what I realized this crystallized for me was that in the entirety of this series up to this point, Avengers have just simply been reacting to things. There has never been a point where the Avengers decided to be proactive. It's just that Earth is initially taken out of orbit, and they try to put out all the fires and all the disasters that causes. Then these two teams of aliens show up and start blowing things up, and so the Avengers try to fight those guys. And then Hulk shows up, and Hulk just starts smashing everyone, and the Avengers try to fight him. And then Challenger shows up, and then the Avengers are just trying to fight him. It's like, during the entirety of this series, it's not just that the Avengers have been on the back foot. It's that there was never a point where they tried to take the initiative. There was one point where one of these people in the crystal structures here, Red Wolf, he actually did do something kind of cool. The problem is that I didn't know who Red Wolf was. I guess I thought he was created for Occupy Avengers. It turns out he actually goes back way, way before that. So I didn't know that. And I don't know about his history, but it turns out he's a much older character than I thought. But nevertheless, like the issue where he makes this sacrifice play to grab one of the super MacGuffins that their cosmic game is based off of, Like, that was kind of a cool moment, but it's the only other moment in this entire series where anything like that has happened. And also, it took an entire issue for him to do that one cool thing. And so this moment here where Lightning, bets his life history against Grandmasters, it's also a cool moment, and it's something that's been building the entire event up to this point. I mean, it opened with Lightning talking about how he's basically nobody cares about him, that he's just this C-list level Avenger that nobody really pays attention to, and now here he is taking on one of the Elders of the Universe. It's like, that's a big moment, and there is a build up to this and a payoff to this, but it's the only moment like it in the entire event, except for Red Wolves, which was not, I mean, it was the same thing, it was a cool moment, but it's not quite on this level. It may have helped, admittedly, if I had been reading some of the Avengers series up to that point. There's some character moments that didn't really make any sense to me. Like, I guess you could also say the Quicksilver sacrificing himself, that's another moment. That's true, but the build up to that was him acting like a jackass in the first part, and I don't know why he was acting like a jackass. Like, that would be something I would have had to have been reading Uncanny Avengers to understand, and I wasn't reading it, so I didn't know why he was, like, being looked down on by everyone. So, some of this payoff stuff, you had to have been reading it up to this point, to, like, years and years of Avengers stories, just going back a few years to do that, and I'm not about to go back and reread Uncanny Avengers or even US Avengers to understand any of it. So that's, I think, story-wise, that's where this whole issue really falls flat, is that 98% of it has been different Avengers just reacting to bad things that were happening to them, rather than taking the initiative and taking control. There's probably a few other moments you could point to in the series. They were small moments that didn't really lead to anything big. Whereas this one, it actually works. Grandmaster can't bring himself to bet his victories. He can't bring himself to bet his own memories and his own accomplishments away. Even though it's very unlikely he's going to lose, he can't bring himself to do it. So, because he folds, Lightning gets all the stuff that he'd bet up to that point, which was the two Avengers that had been holed up here, and the Earth itself gets put back in its orbit. So we see the Avengers taking on Challenger, which turns out it's not enough for them to do that. Voyager does a thing where, for whatever reason, they had to be remembered all the stuff that they'd done. We get a title drop here where Voyager is saying no retreat, no surrender. And then the Scarlet Witch, which I really don't like the modern Scarlet Witch. They turned her into an actual witch, right? She's no longer just a mutant with the ability to channel magical energy into probability-altering hex bolts. She can now, like, call on the forces of nature or whatever. I also really don't like her costume. It looks okay on Elizabeth Olsen, but in a comic book page, it just looks really boring. And so she, even though all the Avengers are here, she, I don't know, does a thing, and it's her that says Avengers Assemble, and not Steve Rogers. I don't know. And then we get the denouement here. Earth gets put back exactly where it was before. Captain Marvel's just looking at it stupidly. So, I don't know. I mean, on the one hand, as much as I've sort of made fun of this series, as much as I've sort of had fun making fun of it, as much as, coming up with the porn titles for the last couple of episodes that I did, talking about how much I hate Scarlet Witch's costume, talking about just different stupid elements in the comic. I mean, there's a lot of things that this event did that are sort of laudatory. I mean, it's Avengers versus Grandmaster. You're bringing together all these people. They're acting like heroes. They're just fighting bad guys. They're not fighting each other. Going big is kind of a big deal in a modern comic industry where so many people just want to play it safe. As many problems as I have with the story, as many problems as I have with the way that different people have been characterized, Hard not to recognize that this series did do some things right, but it also did a lot of things that just didn't make any sense. In order to justify this kind of commitment from readers, it had to be not just big like it was, but really big. Right? I mean, it's 16 parts over 16 weeks. Each issue is at least $4. I think at least 3 of them have been $5. So that's, 60, what? $7 right there, plus taxes. I mean, I wonder how much the trade is going to be. Like, how much of this stuff are they going to have? Is there going to be like a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes stuff in the trade? So it's a big commitment, and I'm just not sure that the story really lived up to that. If this had been a 6-issue miniseries, and I've said this multiple times, but it could have been a 6-issue miniseries that focused entirely on Lightning, and on him going from being just a C-list level Avenger, and then you see everything happening through his perspective, and he comments on all the different Avengers and all the things that he knew about them, and then it ends with him challenging an Elder of the Universe to this sort of really high-stakes game. That could have been a cool story, and I mean, this basically is that story, but it's dragged out a solid 10 issues longer than it needed to be. I mean, I've said this before, but this story is very conceptually similar to JLA Avengers. JLA Avengers was only 4 parts. I think they were oversized issues, but it was still only 4 parts. Whereas 16 issues, it just, even if the story is good, even if it has moments that are cool, even if it has elements to it that do work, I don't think that this lived up to sort of justifying itself. And the effort involved in it is no joke. I mean, the artist here is Pepe Larraz. He did the first 4 or 5 issues, and it seems like he's doing the last 2. So just for somebody like that to do that much work where you have to consistently meet these weekly deadlines, and I realize he started probably about a year ago. He started the planning phases of this, but for Pepe Larraz to work with other artists like Kim DeCento, Paco Medina, Stefano Caselli at one point, I mean, so there's a lot of effort went into this, and I do on some level appreciate that, but when this is all said and done, I'm like, it's okay, I guess. It could have been a lot worse. For better or worse, Mark Waid, Al Ewing, and Jim Zub, they probably are the 3 best writers that are currently working, at least exclusively for Marvel. I'd probably say that there are other writers that might potentially be better. A lot of people like Charles Soule. I liked Christopher Hastings on Gwenpool. There were some other things, but just in terms of consistent work and with a history, these probably are among their 3 best writers. And they create a story that it's not bad, but it's just not living up to how big this book was. Like I said, all the things I mentioned earlier in the video, the fact that I really don't really like Mark Waid and Al Ewing, the fact I don't like the Modern Avengers, the fact I don't really like Modern Marvel, none of that really helps. But it's... I think that the problems of it go beyond just my personal emotional distaste for certain elements of the Modern Avengers lineup. So there's one more issue to go. It's supposed to be some kind of epilogue issue. I don't know if it's going to set up some other kind of event in the future. I can't imagine that if it does, I'm going to be terribly excited about it. But, I don't know. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you've been reading this. Tell me if these videos have helped any. Like, comment, subscribe. In any case, this is Unranked Chevron signing off.